So now we're going to have 3 more of these kind of rapid-fire, 10-minute, give or take, research presentations. Foeday, are you here? You are here, right? Yes, please. So we should have your PowerPoint should be queued. So we're ready for you whenever you're ready.
Hi, my name is Foeday Zinnah from Utah State, PhD student in engineering education. Most of my work is around enhancing workforce development in engineering. And this is like the systematic literature review of my work. So we have been saying this over and over. As we say, technologies kind of emerge. There are a lot of gaps in competency and skills based on what employers kind of looking for. And one of the things we kind of see is some bureaucracy in accreditation process, and also mismatch with the traditional degree. And then that kind of lead to equity pressures demanding alternative and flexible pathways. And then we may likely want to call that the non-degree credential, and we have been defining them as probably looking at badges, certification, pre-apprenticeship, or something like web-based learning. And they kind of really support targeted skills and demanding skills as well. And then they are more time effective when it comes to skill development. And then often they are positioned as pathways for both STEMs and traditional related technical workforce. Like I said, this is a systematic literature review for my dissertation. So basically, I wanted to systematically analyze the STEM workforce, looking at non-degree credentials, what have been studied or what have been new, and then what have been observed. And we kind of look at this systematic literature review as a regular process, looking at some established framework, like the premise framework. And then we kind of look at the literature from 2020 to 2024. We wanted to capture the current happening. And then we kind of work with a librarian that kind of look at engineering in the library, and then we kind of search on databases and try to develop a search engine that look at 4 different databases, and we had about 3,000 plus literature paper coming out, but then we set up some inclusion and exclusion criteria that led us to 27 papers. Though we have some discrete characteristics in our papers, we were more looking at the qualitative aspects, looking at thematic analysis and also content analysis as well. And we just wanted to come up with a few findings. We have a lot of findings that may be interesting when you read the paper, but a few of them, one of them has to do with how non-degree credential functions in the STEM workforce. So it kind of emphasized mostly on experimental and applied learning that is in the design process, and it kind of helped with skill acquisition and workforce singularing. And another one that came out has to do with it kind of really seem to be, non-degree credentials seem to be strong when employers are embedded in the design process. And because they have to validate, at the end, they have to validate whether this is kind of just singularing, or they have to accept it in the workforce. And then if also designed with a web-based learning, that what Kevin, I think he's not here, what Kevin was saying, it's kind of designed as a web-based learning, it's kind of also good for the learner as well. And then there's something we don't really talk about here more often in this conference. But then the alternative pathway is mostly for post-traditional learner in STEM. So those who don't have STEM background at all, maybe those who didn't go to college, they kind of use non-degree credentials as alternative pathway to kind of get into STEM career. But then those who already established in the traditional, maybe they have a degree, they kind of use it as a transitional pathways. Maybe they want to upskill or reskill themselves in terms of emerging technology. And then another thing we want to look at is the competency aspect, that is the skill and the learning aspect. So non-degree credential program in the STEMs kind of emphasize on applied technical skills and for emerging technologies. So whenever emerging technology coming out, employers and institutions want to do non-degree credential for technical skills. But another thing that they embed into that has to do with durable skills. Because more often, employer complain on STEM students don't have that durable skill, like communication, teamwork, or interdisciplinary skills, but non-degree credentials position in order to integrate those durable skills. And then experimental learning kind of strengthens confidence and identity. So most of the people who participate in non-degree credential in the STEM, they kind of have a belonging, seem to have a belonging in the career, and also they kind of strengthen their workforce readiness. And equity and access, which one of my research came out from here, where I'm doing a case study, looking at pre-apprenticeships for Utah women in trade, mostly designed for people who have just an issue, maybe just come from prison and trying to integrate into the non-degree credentials. So it kind of really create access for them, and it kind of also kind of serve mostly in two-year colleges, like maybe community colleges or technical colleges. And then if web-based learning, like pre-apprenticeship, like I talked about, is kind of also create key access for their career transition. And then outcomes depends on support. So most of when I did the interview, the semi-structured interview for the case study, non-financial support kind of single out, like, okay, maybe child care alone can help or kind of continue on our study, can help us get our credential, and also help us to be more and more marketable, to have marketable value as well. And then some of the lacking in the literature, we need long-term evidence. Long-term data is something that we need to understand. How career kind of really sustain, what is the career outcome ready, and then we also need to understand employer outcomes, how employer kind of measuring the value of non-degree credential. And this is something also I'm looking at in the electrified transportation, doing qualitative study with the employer in the electrified transportation, trying to understand the tensions between validating the non-degree credential and how can they make that decision when it comes to hiring and promotion. And then also theoretical frameworks. I think most of the literature I read, they kind of lacking more theoretical framework. And I try to introduce this in most of my research where I'm using like human capacity theory, using the experimental learning theory, then also using the credentialism itself as the tensions where, or let me say where employer have to validate or the perception of employer in order for them to accept the non-degree credential, and at what point do they accept non-degree credential, when they are embedded or when they are kind of, let me say, involved into the design process, do they validate the credential, or when it is like a web-based learning, do they validate the credential as well? Non-degree credential, like I said, is like alternative pathways for both traditional learners and a traditional pathway for those who already have the maybe degree. And another thing I kind of think that has to do, we have to move beyond binary degree comparison. I think it's not really necessary for us to be comparing the non-degree credential and the traditional degree, because the traditional degree already established a lot, and there will be some backfire if we try to compare the outcome between both of them. But we should be looking at more pathways, analyzing more pathways, and then we try to also get a data infrastructure. Data infrastructure is where we have data where researcher can go and validate information, or maybe where we can be able to hold people who provide non-degree credential, we can be able to hold them accountable. Are they really singular in the job, or are they really giving the kind of skills they kind of pour out in their degree discretion? And the theory also, we should apply a lot of theories in our research, and we try to compare different learning groups. We also try to compare different non-degree credentials as well. Thank you. If you want to read the paper, yeah, you can get a full paper.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Jennifer Fong, and I am the Senior Director of Continuing Education and Workforce Development at IEEE. You've heard a couple people mention IEEE a few times up here. If you're not familiar with us, we are the world's largest not-for-profit technical professional organization for engineers and technologists. We publish 1/3 of the world's technical literature in our fields of interest. We are a standard-setting organization. If you've ever used Wi-Fi, that is an IEEE standard. We like to call it IEEE 802.11, which just kind of rolls off the tongue. We do humanitarian activities, and I am responsible for our continuing education, continuing professional education, as well as our credentialing. And we recently, we've been doing credentialing for professional credentials for over 30 years, working with working engineers and technologists, issuing continuing education units, professional development hours. And most recently, we started looking at the semiconductor industry. And we were looking at ways that we could help with the funding of the CHIPS Act and all of those things. And we found that there is a huge skilled technical workforce gap, especially as they were building fabrication facilities and all kinds of areas where they just needed more technical workers, but they didn't necessarily need technical workers with 4-year degrees. So we saw this big global shortage of skilled technical workers. We realized that some of these did not need 4 or even 2-year degrees. And so we said, maybe there's something we can do here. On top of that, we are finding more and more employers are telling us that we just are not, traditional degrees are not keeping up with the pace of technology. Technology that we're going to need next week might not have been invented yet. So it's happening too fast for the standard degrees. And so there are some things that we need. We need to really define skills taxonomies for technical roles, but in a way that is very nimble, so that we can continue to add to it, continue to change it, and it needs to be done with industry. Now, I know sometimes that is easier said than done. However, industry groups like IEEE and others like us are a really important way to get to a lot of employers quickly. And it should be a resource that is leveraged. On top of that, we need to be able to deploy rapidly the credentials that people need to get into the careers that employers need now. And so you need to know what the skills are, and you need a fast way to get it out there. There's also the mobility that is global. We've been talking a lot here about US-based, but the reality is there are needs and technical jobs globally. And when you are using third-party validation of your credentials, sometimes that enables those credentials to go further. A community college has a sphere of influence that is sometimes geographically limited. But when you're using a third-party validator that is globally recognized, that will help to take that credential and make it more valuable to that learner and to employers who recognize it. And I'm going to say something else. There is that concept of KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. When we talk to employers, we are finding that all of this is being made too complicated. We are finding, I've only been doing this for a year. This was my first conference last year as we were moving into skills-based microcredentials. And there's a lot to wrap your brain around. And I'm not saying it's not valid, but what I am saying is we have to get a lot better at messaging. Because I was sitting, I use this story a lot, but I was sitting with a hiring manager at a global semiconductor company in the US, and he said to me, all these people say they have microcredentials. They all mean something different, and so it means nothing to me. And we said, wow, that's really something that maybe we can help with. We need to get solid on language, and we need to do it quickly. So IEEE has sort of introduced this spectrum of credentials. We are working to standardize language around skills-based or all credentials, but primarily skills-based micro-credentials in our fields of interest. So we're looking at things like, you know, everybody understands more or less university degrees and two-year degrees and what that means. But when we're getting into other things, different people are using different words. And we need to start using the same words. Certifications, that is built around a body of knowledge. There is an exam that goes along with it, and there's money that goes with that. When we get into certificates, now we're talking about a program. It's usually tied to a certain amount of hours in a seat. And, you know, depending on the type of credential that you issue, sometimes there are certain requirements. I'm thinking in the professional credential world, if it's a PDH, a professional development hour, that's going to require one kind of assessment. If it's a continuing education unit, it's different. But certificates are a thing. Then we get into microcredentials. In our world, in the framework that we're creating, a skills-based microcredential is a very specific thing, and it is not tied to butts and seats. It is tied to assessment. And if you've got an assessment that this is our framework. It may look familiar because we've looked at a lot of the work that a lot of you are doing as we're building this. Where's Colin? Is he still in the room? You will really recognize this. But we've based this on Bloom's taxonomy. You know, there's a level 1 foundational knowledge. That's one kind of assessment. Then you get into applied skills, and that's a different kind of assessment. And then being able to show abilities at the top level. But learners earn skills-based microcredentials by demonstrating their skills through assessment. We're looking at stackability as, you know, you start at the foundation and you work your way up to mastery. And we need these credentials to be verifiable. We need them built on open badge standards so that they can be digitally validated, digitally shareable. And there's a lot of different kinds of experiences where you can gain these skills, whether it be in person, whether it be an online class, whether it be prior learning, whether it be on the job. There's lots of different ways that you can earn them. So I want to very quickly share with you 2 case studies that we have been doing at IEEE. We partnered with the University of Southern California as part of the California Dreams Microelectronics Commons Hub. They were creating a clean room training for semiconductor technicians. They partnered with us to identify specific skills that people were learning. They weren't all just students at USC. Some of these were from the outside. It was funded by the government, the federal government. And students that were able to demonstrate the specific skills earned these IEEE microcredentials, which then they were able to take and show to local industry in that area. Yes, they could sit for a while in a bunny suit and hack that, be able to do that job. They were able to say, I know what lithography is. I have seen this machine and know what it does. And so with those skills, what we're finding now is that other schools within the hub are starting to adopt this program, and it's actually being transferred across the United States, carrying those IEEE microcredentials, and it is a way that we are creating opportunity that is recognizable across the US. Another one, very quickly, we partnered with Grand Canyon University that was creating an industry-created program for high school students. We've been talking a lot about high school and K-12. For juniors and seniors in Arizona, TSMC worked specifically with Grand Canyon University to create a program for manufacturing technicians. And in that program, students learned skills that were very specific to that job at TSMC. They aligned that with the IEEE skills-based microcredentials. We identified what specific skills they were walking out with. Students that earned those credentials then had the opportunity to get an interview. If you had the credentials, you got an interview at TSMC. And the exciting part is that 71% of the students that went through that program were hired by TSMC as manufacturing technicians, and 90% of the students that got hired are still working there. They're obviously coming back. They're going to be doing that program over and over. We've now, Amcor Technology there heard about that, is excited about it, and now they're building a program specific to them. But we talk about how employers need to be involved in the design of the program. And when they are and they're invested and say, you do this, you earn this, you get the job, that's sort of the trifecta. That's how we make this work. So if you have any questions, That's the QR code for the IEEE credentialing program. All organizations can apply to become approved partners with the IEEE credentialing program, and would love to share more. And I'm done. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jane Kim, a senior analyst from the American Council on Education in the research team specifically. Today, I'm presenting on behalf of our project team, which includes colleagues at ACE and also at Higher Ed Insight. We had like partnership for this project especially. So this work supported by Lumina Foundation. And our project is basically a landscape study, and this presentation is about our recent publication of the 4-part brief series about non-degree programs, and especially like particular focus on those provided at colleges and universities. And we really appreciate this opportunity to share our work with you all today. So, yeah. Before I dive in, let me just share a quick word about ACE for those who are not familiar with us. So we are the membership organization and the nation's rating coordinating body for the higher education. And we are the only major organization in higher education representing all types of institutions, not just for the 2-year and 4-year. And we are representing both. And we are also representing private and public as well. So we have over 1,600 member institutions, and they collectively educate two out of every 3 students in U.S. higher education. So ACE's work is organized around 3 strategic commitments, which is like affirming public trust in higher education, which is getting more important these years, and championing social and economic mobility and enriching institutional capacity as well. So this landscape study, you can see that this study speaks directly to all 3 commitments we have, because like understanding how these programs work and who they serve and how they connect to institutional missions is essential to each of them. So for the context of this study, we had 2 like major motivations of this project. The first one was, like, as you all know, higher education is evolving rapidly. So colleges and universities are offering new array of non-degree programs every year, like certificates, boot camps, digital badges, and other types of microcredentials. And these programs are expanding access for and serving new learner populations and responding to changing workforce needs. But we didn't know well about these programs, especially at the time we began this project in 2023. So we had very like marginal level of the understanding of these programs. So we started this. And then we also, another motivation was our partnership with the Carnegie Foundation. It was very practical motivation of this study. So AC has been partnering with the Carnegie Foundation to reshape the Carnegie classification system, like starting in 2022. And we have been working on just update the classification system since then. But as you know, the classification system has historically centered on degree granting like activities of institutions. But as non-degree programs grow, we needed to understand those programs better to just have the full picture of the higher education institutions' activities. So we started this project to better understand those programs and to think about how to reflect the evolving landscape of higher education better in the classification system and highlight institutions' contributions to social and economic mobility. So our goals were to have some like landscape study of non-degree programs, especially at colleges and universities. And we also wanted to generate some insights for the next iteration of the Carnegie classification. As some of you know, like we released the 2025 classification already, but it's still like focusing on the degree granting activities of institutions. So we are still like, in progress to think about how to better reflect the non-degree activities of institutions. And also we wanted to inform our stakeholders because as we are the membership organization, so we have the commitment to serve our member institutions. So we wanted to share some like better knowledge around these programs with our institutions as well. So for this study, we specifically conducted as the multi-method study from 2023 to 5 with 4 main activities. We began with the comprehensive synthesis of existing research on non-degree credential, especially like including all the literature from NCRN and other like research organizations from George Washington and like Georgetown, CW institution and other, so many like research organizations in this field. And then we conducted 90-minute focus group interviews with 5 institutions between February and August 2 years ago. And it included like Des Moines Area Community College, Ivy Tech, Miami-Dade College, USC, and Wake Technical Community Colleges. I think many of you are familiar with these institutions as they have been doing strong work in providing the non-degree programs for their students and communities. So participants included deans, program coordinators, and institutional research staff, academic advisors, and career coaches as well. And we selected these institutions based on our research on IPAS certificate completion data and institution type, and we also considered geographic diversity. So we also analyzed some public data available at the time. So we analyzed IPAS certificate completion data, especially from 2001 to 2022, to see the trends, how like the certificate completion is increasing over time, and across more than like 6,000 Title IV institutions, including both degree granting and non-degree granting institutions. And this was supplemented by National Student Clearinghouse data to see the student level data. And also we include this credential ensign data to understand the broader range of the credential types available at the time. And we lastly brought some like researchers together with the help of NCRN last summer, along with some like employers and policymakers, to validate our findings from the interviews and the public data analysis and deepen our insights on values and outcomes especially. And we also discussed some implications for the classification system. So before turning to findings, this is a landscape study and we have 4-part brief series. So let me just do my best to summarize all key findings for each brief. But before that, I want to share the conceptual framework that organized this work. So we developed a 5-domain ecosystem framework for this project because we wanted to take an ecosystem view and we felt like this is not just the one innovative program at institution level. This is a kind of like new ecosystem in higher education. So at the center are the programs themselves and 5 interacting domains, which includes program structure, like what do the programs look like, their structure and their modality, and how they design and approve the programs, and who offers them, which is colleges and universities in this brief, and who else is involved, like external partners, like the ed tech companies and like employers and a lot of like government related organizations as well, and how are the programs funded and regulated, the policy environment, and how is the success defined and occurs, like especially across different stakeholders through the domain of values and outcomes. So each brief examines one or more of these domains, and together they give us multidimensional picture of the non-degree ecosystem. So this framework generated a 4-part brief series like this in the screen, and I will walk through like each of them now very briefly. Our first brief, the title was Designing, Implementing, and Evaluating College Non-Degree Programs. And this draws on our focus group interviews with 5 institutions especially. And the key themes emerged consistently across all 5 institutions are like the first one was the workforce alignment is the primary goal and motivation of providing these programs for all institutions. So all institutions design programs around labor market needs and using like employer advisory groups many times and to shape the curriculum in real time. And external collaboration is central in the sense because programs are co-designed with the local employers and community organizations to ensure real-world relevance. And especially, like, for example, the Des Moines area community college, is it work? No, okay. Continuously shape its curricular through advisory groups made up of like industry leaders. So they have like the regular meetings with industry leaders to just, continuously update their curriculum. But, the third point is a kind of challenge. Data tracking was a major challenge for all 5 institutions because institutions like post-completion data pipeline especially, they share that how challenging it is maintain connection with students after they complete their programs at institution level data collection. So they just showed a lot of challenges in maintaining and tracking, especially post-completion data, and they had like kind of hope and desire to see like national level data initiatives to continuously track the post-completion outcomes of these programs rather than institution level. And our second brief takes the national data lens. So let me share a few headline numbers here. So in 2022, which was the most recent data when we did this research, 1.15 million certificates were awarded, and it was representing over 20% of all post-secondary completions, including all degree completions. And this was nearly doubled in 2 decades, and about 42% of the certificates took between 12 weeks and 1 year to complete, and which speaks to how short and targeted many of these programs are. And public to ears institutions were reading the providence of these programs, with 44% of all certificate completions were awarded by public two-year institutions. And for-profit institutions awarded 27% of certificate at the time, but they only awarded 6% of all degree completions. So it's kind of striking divergence between the non-degree and degree offering by the for-profit institutions. And we also had some like NSC data, National Student Clearinghouse data, because they showed something particularly interesting because they break down the students with prior award, but with the first-time completers of the certificates. So we found that about 30% of all undergrad certificate completers already held a prior credential, including it could be like bachelor's, master's, or associate, or sometimes it was another certificate. So this tells us like degree plus non-degree pathways are really growing, as Terry this morning shared with us in another like 10-minute research presentation. So many people are not choosing between the degree and non-degree credential. They are especially like actually choosing both sometimes. But you see the data gap as well here, because iPads still only captures a slice of this picture. They just capture the certificate completion, not other types of, many other types of non-degree credentials, like district badges and other types of micro-credentials. But we are seeing a lot of like better infrastructure is emerging, like census data, NTEWS survey. They are tracking others with many different types of non-degree credentials. And we also see like the state non-credit data project from Rutgers University as well. And so yeah, we have some hopes here. Oh, time is up. So I have some like key themes for the third and fourth brief, but as we all know, like the outcome measure is just, still limited. And yeah, for the external partners, we know that these programs are not shaped by the institutions alone. We need to take account of many other like external influences here. And we see some like policy initiatives are coming, like including the upcoming workforce bill as well. So these are the key themes and maybe potential directions for the next phase, but I'm happy to share this slide with you all, like if you're interested in running more about this. And this is my contact information, so happy to connect with you all after that. Thank you.